What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. And joining me today, Ashley Bastock, Jimmy Watkins, and we are coming to you guys after the Cavs clinched the number one seed in the Eastern Conference and locked up home court advantage throughout the East playoffs after defeating the Chicago Bulls 135-113 in a matchup that could preview the first round of the playoffs for the Cleveland Cavaliers if the Chicago Bulls do get through the play-in tournament. But I want to start and focus on the Cavs. Let's go first full circle for a little bit, right? This Cavs team was 48 wins last year. The expectation was for them to be a little bit around there, right, guys? Now they have 63 wins, 16 losses. This is a team that is a title contender through and through. And even from the man that got his job this summer, coming from the guy that said he had high expectations for this team, had the understanding of the roster talent and the caliber of the players that he got to work with. But Kenny Atkinson, did not see this coming. And it's something that we've talked about at length because we knew that this team could be good. We knew this team could go a little bit further than last year with the offensive changes, the reimagination of the identity of this team. But Jimmy, we talked about this a lot before the season started. I don't think anybody saw this, even if the players say that they had high expectations for themselves.
It's just a massive piece of validation for the entire organization, because this is when they decided to run it back. I think that was greeted with a bunch of skepticism across the fan base, across the media space. I know we on this podcast had questions about how much of that was really Kobe betting on the internal development and Kenny Atkinson, and how much of it was didn't like the sniffs I got in the trade market for your Jared Allens, your Darius Garlands, etc. And it's possible that that still influenced this, but clearly, without question, Kobe's been proven unequivocally correct in small tweaks from a schematic perspective being the right move. I wrote earlier today that this guy deserves Executive of the Year for making no moves, essentially. The DeAndre Hunter trade has worked out nicely. You get a nice player. You also get under the luxury tax. That's a nifty piece of business while sacrificing minimal draft capital. Swaps on swaps is, that's a small price to pay. But they're not in the position to make the DeAndre Hunter trade if all of their internal bets don't pay off, right? So I think that's a win for Kenny as well, because every piece of his vision that he shared when he first got hired has come true. Negotiating with Donovan Mitchell to take a smaller role, that's a difficult thing to do. It worked immediately, which helps, but it worked immediately, which means you're onto something. The Evan Mobley project, 5 stars, 10 out of 10. Kenny joked in the post-game presser tonight that it feels like sometimes Evan is their best shooter. His leap as a 3-point shooter, I think it was Mikey McNuggets who put in a post-game that Evan has 13 games of 13 games with 3 3-pointers made or more. That's a mouthful. Go ahead and try and say that one at home a few times. This season, before this year, I think he had 3 in his career. It's just a massive jump. We've talked about that a ton. Evan as an aggressor, Evan as an initiator, Evan's body. Again, every piece of his game has taken a massive step forward. Darius Garland, reclamation season. We've hit a rough skid here late in the year, but he got back to all-star status. I think he may even still have a case for third-team All-NBA, but at his peak, he was certainly in that conversation. And, of course, Jared Allen, the guy that probably above all else, everyone was rushing out of town, still as steady as ever, still proved. The Evan development is a big piece of this, but we were asking over the summer, can Evan develop the way that you want him to develop if he's playing next to Jared? The answer in all capital letters, yes, you dummies, because Kobe made the right coaching hire, Kenny made the right coaching tweaks, and all the players around these guys have made the requisite sacrifices to clear out for all this stuff to happen, and it has resulted in one of the best stories in the NBA.
Ashley, I want to ask you from afar, because obviously you watch the games when you're at home during the Brown season and you're kind of getting to see this team from a broader perspective. When you talk and think about this team and how they've kind of grown into what they've become, I know you've covered this team for a couple of years. Did you ever think we were going to get back to this after the ashes of the LeBron era and how this team has developed into a true title contender and one of the best in the Eastern Conference, and after tonight, the number one team in the East?
Yeah, I didn't. And I mean, I don't think that's crazy to say, because Kenny Atkinson today even talked about how he thinks this is like this just feels different for him in terms of having a team that legitimately has a chance to win a title. I mean, I think that was big. Those Brooklyn teams he was a coach of had high expectations. Obviously, they sort of underperformed, and he stepped down, and then he was with Steve Kerr for a few years, right? Like, he was with Ty Lue for 1 year with the Clippers. We know all that. For him to say this feels different, I think, is an acknowledgement of those things. And I think, number one, it was overall, the turnaround post LeBron happened a lot quicker than most people expected, right? Because the 4 years from LeBron's first era to LeBron 2.0 in Cleveland, things were abysmal, and he was the missing piece that allowed a guy like Kyrie Irving, and then obviously you get Kevin Love to flourish. And then we have the 4 great years, and then he's gone, and I think everyone just assumes, well, you haven't done it without LeBron before, so why is it going to be any different now? And I think even last year, seeing they win a series, right, but they still can't get over that hump and make an extended playoff run. So, well, at the same time, I'm I don't think I came into this year expecting them to get the 1 seed, expected them to be a playoff team. But still, for me, looking ahead, the biggest question is, okay, now, is that going to be enough to make that extended run? And we were talking about that during the game, Ethan. That's just the wild card with this team still. And I've said this before on this podcast, it's the unanswerable question that we're simply not going to know until they're in that situation.
And actually, I think that's a great segue into the breakdown of tonight's game, because I felt like tonight was a great indication of the two sides of the Cleveland Cavaliers, right? They can be sluggish to start the game. They can allow teams that should not be in conversations with them to be in those conversations. The Chicago Bulls, there's no way this Chicago Bulls team that had their C team, basically, you have guys like Kobe White, Lonzo Ball, Josh Giddey, all on the bench, all on the sidelines, and now you telling me that after the first quarter, it's a 1-point game, it's 25-24. Sure, it's just 12 minutes into the game, but your foot should already have been down their throat. Apologies, none. Then you got to see in the second quarter where this team just became or reminded themselves who they are, right? They had 10 threes in the second quarter alone. And then again in the third quarter, we've talked about this all season, the third quarter has been the Achilles heel of this Cavs team, right? They allowed the Chicago Bulls to bring it back within single digits at multiple different times this contest. And then again, in the fourth quarter, they ended up dropping 9 threes in the fourth quarter alone. So 19 threes in 2 quarters, and then just 6 in the first and the third quarters, respectively. I don't want to say that they live and die by the 3, but I'm saying that they live and die by the 3. And that's something that they're going to have to lean on when we get into the playoffs, especially because we know that we've seen it. We've seen it in the past couple of weeks. They need their 3-point shot to be there, especially against these upper tier teams. And of course, today, even though they had 6 threes in over 2 quarters, which is not enough, they made 25 total because of the 19 over 2 different quarters, right? So that means that they tied for the second most threes in a single game in team history. So imagine if they actually play to the standard that they're supposed to be at for 48 minutes against a team that shouldn't be in the conversations with them. Another stat that I think is important to note because of the offensive growth of this team, mainly due to Kenny Atkinson and also the growth of Darius Garland and Evan Mobley, who we'll get into a little bit later. Tonight was the Cavs franchise record 20th game with 130 or more points this season. The previous team record for 130 or more points in a single season was just 5. Guys, they quadrupled what their original record was coming into this season. I think it exactly identifies how this team has grown. And it's funny to me to think that this team still considers themselves to be a defensive identity first team. And it makes sense in parts because you can also look to the other side and how they forced 20 turnovers by the Chicago Bulls, who didn't really have a true facilitator and contributor on the offensive end tonight. Jimmy, when we talk about the offensive growth of this team, when we talk about the three-pointers, and I'm going to let Ashley get into this as well because I know she's writing for it for the morning, how important is the three ball to you?
It's the currency of offense in our sport, frankly. I think we've said this before. Basically, it's not go up there and shoot 50 threes and you have a good offense, but if your offense is naturally generating a lot of three-pointers, that usually means you have a pretty good offense because it's usually connected to how often you are able to get into the paint, how often you are able to put defenses in rotation and make them scramble. So Kenny's made that an emphasis, and you just got to think about where this offense was around this time last year. I mean, at certain points of last year, JB had this team shooting more threes and playing pace and space, but it was a little bit different. It was a little bit different. Just not everyone felt as involved, and the second we got to the playoffs, the offense cratered, and I just don't think that we don't have. I just don't have that feeling about the offense this year. I'm just not that worried about it. And I do think, and we can talk about, we will talk about this as we get closer to the playoffs. To look at some of the splits from the Cavs since New Year's, they started so hot from three, unsustainably hot from three. Some of the splits from New Year's, they've come back to earth a little bit, and I wonder, and I asked this to our subtexters the other day, I wonder what happens in the playoffs with the Cavs offense if they're closer to a top 10-ish three-point shooting team than they are the best three-point shooting team in the league, or a top three three-point shooting team in the league, as they have been for much of the year. But the idea is, like, even though their percentages have dipped over the last couple of months, they're still generating about 42 attempts a game. They're still making about 14, 15 attempts per game. That's even if the percentages dip a little bit, that's still two hallmarks of a healthy offense. And it just, again, speaks to the job that Kenny has done, empowering guys to shoot. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different guys made 3 threes tonight. Now, the Bulls suck, particularly on defense. Not only are the Bulls bad to begin with, but they were shorthanded tonight. So we got to take some of this stuff with a grain of salt. But 25 threes is 25 threes, brother. Getting 50 up is getting 50 up. And as you Cavs, the glass half full Cavs fans might be yelling into their phones right now. Well, this is the progression to the mean, right? Okay, they've been slumping for a little while here. Maybe this is a massive avalanche coming on the other end. It's just how secure I feel in their offense heading into this postseason after how bad it looked for parts of the last two. Such a massive difference.
Ashley, I know you're writing about this for the morning, about the three-point shot and how important it is. I wrote about how if the three-point shot isn't there for the Cavs, this is a very different conversation when it comes to the playoffs. It's, again, live and die by it, and especially with how the defense has played, and we want to see that ramp up in the playoffs. But I really do truly think that this offense is what is going to help them get to the next stage and push further than the Eastern Conference semifinals, which obviously is the first goal of this team. Where do you stand on the 3-point shooting in tonight's game, and then as a whole, especially as we go into the playoffs?
A game like tonight, I think, and I know, Ethan, you're going to go down this road probably at some point this week, but tonight, for me, Darius going 6 of 10 is really like the key here. And I think we've been in the last few weeks where Darius has struggled for whatever reason. Obviously, tonight they don't have Donovan. And Jimmy, did you say today is his best game in how long? Points wise, 28 points
It's
on 10 of 17 shooting.
In like a month. He had a 30-point game in early March, I believe.
Yeah, so best game since early March. We are in early April. We're almost in mid-April, actually. So I think to me that's a big part of this, right? When Darius is on, then it's good for them as a 3-point shooting team. And they have multiple, everyone else who did really well tonight hit at least 3 threes. I mean, when you're having Evan Mobley get involved like that too, that's huge. I do just still, not to be the girl who cried wolf, like, this is just the nature of being a team that's taking the fourth most threes. They're taking the fourth most threes right now, coming into tonight. They're making the second most threes behind Boston. Boston leads both of those categories, obviously. And I think, again, in a playoff series, you just worry you don't want them to go cold at the wrong time. That is always going to, I think, be a risk. And we know when they do go cold, Ethan, I know you had the stat in your story the other day. It hasn't changed since they made 50% of their threes tonight. But those games where they're below 32%, they're 7-8. There's 15 of them. They're 7-8. And their 4 worst performances have all come since mid-March. So, and those are all like in the 20%. So you don't want them to be rolling into the end of April and into May shooting like that. So hopefully today helped them find something they talked about. Couldn't really get specifics out of anybody on this, but they changed some of the ways they're shooting at shoot-arounds. Obviously, we know this team doesn't practice a lot. It's very different from how JB was running things the last couple of years and just the way their schedule is laid out. So, like, how you fix it, I don't really know. You kind of just right now have to bet on your best players are going to make shots when the time counts, when it's a 7-game series, when it's a win or go home situation. It's part of the reason I think why home court and this team securing the 1 seed in the East is so important, because any little bit is going to help with that. But again, it kind of just all goes back to unknown entity right now in terms of what this team is going to do with its 3-point percentage once they hit the playoffs. But obviously they're taking so many of them, it has to be a net positive for them. Otherwise it's going to be a negative.
Especially when you look at how these teams are going to defend them in the playoffs, they're going to try and run them off the line, right? They're going to try them and run them out of their 3-point shots because they know how lethal that is. So when you do have the opportunity to put them up in these playoff series, they got to go down or it's going to be a negative, as Ashley was pointing out. And just one more point before I get into the next section, which Ashley kind of alluded to. Darius hit 6 threes tonight, right? He had a game high, 28 points. This is Darius's 4th game with 6 or more threes this season. He has 211 made 3-pointers this season, which is the 3rd most in a single season in Cavs franchise history. So again, we've seen the drop off from Darius over the last month, but we also have to be very cognizant of how good he's been. And him and Kenny Atkinson both admitted tonight that he needed this kind of game to just see the ball go through the basket. And Darius even admitted that he had been BSing over the last couple of games, not getting his shots where he wanted them or just not even getting them to fall. So I think that's really important for Darius's confidence and obviously the overlooking of this team, because I think the 2 biggest players when it comes to the playoffs are going to be Darius Garland and Evan Mobley in determining whether they get where they want to go. But Jimmy, I know you have an article coming out tomorrow about how important home court advantage is for the Cleveland Cavaliers, especially as we look at the playoffs and all these things. The Cavs have gotten the number one seed in the Eastern Conference just 4 times, right? This is the 4th time in franchise history that they've been able to do that. How important is home court advantage, which you've seen not only in the NBA, but also in the NFL and all these things? I feel like it's just something that they necessarily didn't plan to get, but now that they're here, I mean, you can only hope that it's going to be a significant positive for them.
In general, it's good to have a loud crowd on your side and sleep in your own bed, get your routine, all that. I was looking this up. I think generally home teams win like 54-ish% of the games in the playoffs, which is almost a negligible difference, right? But the difference to me comes in when you go deep into a series. Game 7, home teams in Game 7 are 109-33 all time in the NBA. That is about a 77% win percentage. That's better than Jared Allen's league-leading field goal percentage. That's better for the Browns fans among us. That's better than Shedeur Sanders' nation-leading completion percentage with all those bubble screens they were throwing down in Boulder, Colorado last year. It's a really good hit rate. And I was talking to Tristan Thompson at his locker about this after the game. We were talking about last year in Orlando. And you remember the Cavs are getting absolutely smoked in the first half of that game. They're down like 20 and a half. And I bring this up, and Tristan just cuts me off. He goes, "Oh, yeah, there's no way we come back in that game if we're on the road." But it's just easier to swing momentum when the crowd's on your side. And he was basically saying that if you're playing at home in one of those games and you're behind, it never feels like you're out of it. And if you're ahead, that extra energy, that extra kick drains teams quicker. It's a real anecdotal thing. I have this record, this number that tells you that it's a really good thing to have Game 7. Now, part of that is the higher seed. It always has Game 7 at home, so that's part of it too. But these are series that, to that point in the series, have gone back and forth over and over again. And 77% of the time, the home team wins it. It's just these supreme pressure, high tension moments seems to be where the crowd and the energy really kicks in for the team that has it behind them.
Just experiencing the Game 7 last year, I think everybody can agree that there was, for fans, I can imagine, and for the entire organization, until they made that run, there's like this pit in their stomach because, Jimmy, as we talked about at the end of last season, if they lose Game 7, Kobe Altman might not be in the Executive of the Year conversations because he might not have had the choice to keep guys around. It would have just been a big explosion with people getting tossed every which way because of conversations they would have been having after that game, after that series. Not just Jamie Bickerstaff, of course, but I just think the home court advantage does so much for this team in particular. Because of their home record, because of how they've held themselves accountable. And then also, just as you were mentioning, Jimmy, they won every game in that first series at home. Neither team won a game on the other team's court last year in that first round. Obviously, the Cavs got a win in Boston in the second round in the Eastern Conference semifinals. That was their only win of the series. So it depends on the matchup, but I do think it's an important wrinkle to look at when it comes to this team and how they just feed off the sixth man, which is the Rocket Arena crowd. But actually, as we continue to look at how this team is going to move forward now that they've locked up the number one seed, this Cavs team has prioritized health all season long. But now it's really like these last 3 games don't matter at all, except for guys like Ty Jerome and DeAndre Hunter, who are trying to accumulate certain amount of minutes, certain amount of games to be in these 6 man of the year and most improved conversations. But Kenny Atkinson alluded to the possibility of resting guys like Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, obviously not Jared Allen. Maybe he does the I'm a start, but I'll play half the game situation as we've seen earlier, because they understand that the reason they felt they could not get further or past the Boston Celtics last year is because they weren't healthy. How important is health to this team, one? And two, how do you feel about them managing minutes with some of their core guys, their star players, or even some that they just listed as banged up and bruised, to ensure that they're going to be ready? Because there's this discrepancy between, do you rest and be a little bit potentially rusty after having 2 weeks off, or do you continue to play and get into a rhythm and see how that helps you?
Health to me is the most important thing. It is more important than home court advantage. It is more important than what seed you are. It is the end-all, be-all of any team looking to make a postseason run. And quite honestly, on Sunday night, when Donovan Mitchell is down, writhing in pain on the floor, that should have been the reminder to every single person who cares about what this team does, who covers this team, who is a fan, who is in the front office, who is on the roster. That is the warning, flashing red lights about just how important this is. So I get the balance. But the most important thing to me is making sure everyone comes out of these next 3 games unscathed. On Monday morning, you cannot have one of the core 4 members of this team in question. So I think whatever you got to do to ensure that happens, great. I get it. Jared Allen really wants to play in all 82 games. Play him in as little of those games as possible going forward, because they don't really matter at this point. All that matters is these guys are going to be healthy. Like you said, when we asked Kenny Atkinson about this, it certainly sounds like it is his preference now. He said it, that Donovan Mitchell does not play, but they're going to have the discussions with those guys. And he brought up the point, all these studies now that say, like, elite athletes like these guys, it takes 2 full weeks of being out of something to get out of shape. I really think they're going to be fine. I think they've played enough together. I don't think you have to be worried about, oh, well, what if there's 14 days? Like, that's really not that long to them. And it's not like they're not going to be doing anything. They're going to have some time to catch their breath here a little bit. I actually think that is maybe more important at this stage of an NBA season than making sure they're not rusty. Like, I think it'd be really hard to get rusty at this point. The health to me is first and foremost. So I hope we don't see a lot of these core guys over the next couple of days here coming up.
Also, if you're going to get rusty after 10 days or 11 days, wouldn't you get rusty after 7? Like, the rhythm conversation, you have a week off regardless. So I think that's kind of a moot point. I would also, just to Ashley's point, I've been looking stuff up on this and doing some reporting on how Kenny has managed minutes and how that's sort of an evolution from years past. There's a saying that goes around the league that it's not the best team that wins, it's the healthiest. And to illustrate that, I looked up Spotrac has this thing that measures the cost of games lost, essentially. It's a dollar figure placed on injuries. Basically, if you have an expensive player, we think that's a better player. We weight those heavier, and they rank the teams every year based on most expensive games lost to least expensive games lost. And essentially, of the last 9 champions, we only have 3 teams who have even been in the top half of the league. 3 champions who have even been in the top half of the league in games lost, money games lost. I don't know what they call it on Spotrac. I don't have it pulled up right now, but it's in this. I have the rankings in this Word doc. 2 of them are the Warriors. One is one of the Kevin Durant teams. So throwing that out because they were unfair. The other Warriors team was ranked so high because it was the year that Klay Thompson missed half the year, and he's obviously a very expensive player, but he was healthy by playoff time. Everyone else is like 18th or lower on this list, which just goes to show you, like, this doesn't mean this is a regular season stat. So this doesn't mean that all these teams were necessarily as healthy as they could possibly be in the playoffs. It just goes to show you that if you're, it doesn't, what I should say is it doesn't exempt you from something going wrong in the playoffs, for someone turning an ankle or bad luck happening, right? But it's just the idea of, if you're thinking this way over the course of 82 games, you're setting yourself up for longer term success. At shoot around earlier today, I was asking Darius Garland about, I mean, it's hard for him to talk about injuries from last year and not talking about the acute stuff. But he was saying, from a bumps and bruises, nicks and cuts perspective, he can tell that there's so much less wear and tear on his body this year. Donovan Mitchell is playing more games this year. He's going to play more games this year than he has played in like 6 years. And he's typically been a pretty durable guy as it is. This is not an accident. This whole philosophy that Kenny's instituted top down, Donovan leads the team in minutes, and it's like 31.4. Again, as we saw on Sunday, that doesn't stop you from having a bad ankle turn, but what the science kicks back to you is that, like, the soft tissue lingering kind of pulls and small tears that can maybe not end your season but ruin a season because it lingers, that stuff is controllable to some degree. Of course, everything with injury is a little bit related to luck, but you have some power over that, and the Cavs are exerting power over it. And everyone, Darius, literally, as he got off the chair today at shoot-around, he knocked on the court, knock on wood, because athletes are so superstitious when we're talking injuries. So everyone, again, as I've said a couple of times on the pod, knock on wood together that this keeps up. But the Cavs are doing the right things. And the teams, here's a Venn diagram for you. Teams that win 60 games, teams that stay healthy, you find a lot of deep playoff runs in that Venn diagram.
I think that's a good point, and I think the Cavs continue to kind of separate themselves from narratives that they've had about them coming into the season. Obviously, LeBron James era, because it's the first time that they've had number one seed in the East without LeBron James. I just think when we look at this team, when we look at this season, it is different. It's changed. There's so many different things that we can point to. And obviously, we weren't that worried. The team wasn't that worried about the March stretch, the 4-game losing streak, all these things. But there were times, and I think it's valid to even point to Kenny Atkinson being like, the Sacramento Kings loss kind of slapped us in the face. Like, hey, this is real. Like, there are teams out here that are learning what we're good at, learning what we're not good at, and they're going to attack us. This isn't the Orlando Magic, the Indiana Pacers, the Chicago Bulls in the playoffs. Everything gets ramped up. Everything gets put to a different level. And again, I agree with Ashley. Like, we have to keep waiting to see how it actually pans out, because they haven't done anything yet. But tonight, as Kenny Atkinson says, Cavs fans can celebrate. Cavs fans can sit back with a sigh of relief. They got the job done for the regular season. They're the number one seed in the Eastern Conference. They have already gone above and beyond majority of the goals that a lot of people had set for them, and even what Kenny Atkinson had believed they were going to accomplish. He had set the goal at 50 wins. They got 63 and the number one seed. So I think it's great to see this Cavs team be able to bring itself from what it was just a few years ago. Obviously, Donovan Mitchell accelerates that process, but not a lot of people thought we would be here, especially after last season. Ashley, Jimmy, anything you want to add before we get out of here?
Ty Jerome, exclusive shooting club. I texted this out during the game. Another organizational victory lap. We heard about September MVP, Ty Jerome, back during the preseason. I was like, okay, that's kind of interesting. We'll see what happens there. Dude's literally putting together one of the greatest shooting seasons ever. Okay? Type into Basketball Reference, Stathead. Players under 6'5", who average 12 points a game, 60% effective field goal percentage. There's 10 dudes ever who have done it. Steph Curry's done it a bunch of times, but 10 separate players have done it. Ty Jerome is on pace to join that crew this year. I just think that's another guy who deserves recognition in all of this, deserves to be celebrated. And as I said to you guys after the game, if we're resting a bunch of guys, I wouldn't hate to see primary option Ty Jerome over the next couple games. Let's just see what happens. Dude's scoring like 23 a game for 36 minutes. And he just, every time he misses, you're surprised. So would love to see what he could do with a longer runway.
I think that's great. I think Ty Jerome obviously is a guy that over his last 9 games, excluding the 5-game stint where he was injured with left knee tendonitis, he hasn't scored less than 10 points in a contest, right? And even when he didn't play the last 6 minutes of the game the other night against Sacramento in the fourth quarter, he still had the most points in that contest for the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think it's huge what he's done, and I even said this to Ashley during the game tonight. The biggest thing that's different between this year's Cavs team and last year's Cavs team outside of Kenny Atkinson, they didn't have Ty Jerome. Now they do, and it's made a big, big difference. But with all that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs Insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. This is where you can send in your questions for our weekly Hey Chris episode that we'll do later on this week. To do so, sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage of the Cavs from me, Chris, Jimmy, and Ashley. But this isn't just our podcast. It's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.